Great. Well, thank you so much for making some time tonight to join us. We are here to talk about this really exciting project that we're working on with the Town of Cornwall. So it's the official plan and zoning and development bylaw review. So this is a really great opportunity for us to kind of take a look at where we've been, look at where we're going, and have a bit of, reflection on kind of how we want to grow into the future. So just a little bit about who we are. So we're with a company called Upland Planning and Design Studio. We are based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And we work all over Atlantic Canada on land use plans. We also do active transportation planning, all kinds of different types of work. But the people who you'll be seeing throughout this project are myself. So I'm Ryan McLean. I'm the senior engagement lead with Upland and also a planner. You'll also meet Ian Watson, who is our senior planner and one of the partners at Upland. One of the other planners on the project is Carmen Rojas. You may have met Devin Jennings-Lander, who's on the call with us tonight as well, who's an engagement specialist with Upland. And Carmen, Devin, and I were kind of positioned throughout Cornwall last week, talking to people, just kind of meeting them where they were at. And then someone who you probably won't see who's working in the background is Angharad Wiley, who is our GIS analyst. So she's basically the cartographer on the project, doing all of the mapping work. So, a little bit about what we want to talk about tonight. So, first, we want to start off by talking a bit about the project itself. I also understand that planning is often a fairly complicated topic for some. So, we like to do a quick little planning 101 for folks to just kind of give a bit of an understanding of how the whole process works. We want to talk a little bit about the Cornwall context. So we've been doing some background report work up to this point, and it's a great opportunity for us to just kind of start looking at, the demographics and all of these different pieces of the puzzle so we can have a little bit more context for our discussion. Then we'll talk about the project timeline and engagement opportunities throughout the project. So to kick us off, we are, as I mentioned, working on a review of your official plan and your zoning and development bylaw. So planning documents, we always say are living documents. They are meant to change over time. You are never meant to get it right once and then have it stay that way forever. They are supposed to be looked at and reviewed on a regular basis so that they can evolve as we evolve as people and communities. And in PEI, they undergo periodic review roughly every 5 to 10 years. We recently worked on the Charlottetown official plan, and that one hadn't been redone in about 25 years or so. So it started off with the line, now that the Confederation Bridge is open, if that gives you any context as to how long sometimes it can take for these to get reviewed. But Cornwall's doing a great job and they are right on schedule to have their plan reviewed. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is as we move forward. So, a little bit about planning more generally. We always talk about planning as a collaborative process, and it's used to help everyone in the community. That's residents, business owners, and civic leaders like your councilors to envision a common future for their community. At its core, planning provides the framework that guides how land is used, how and where growth and development happens, and how and where buildings are built. So we kind of set the table as to where certain land uses should take place, and that's based on a variety of different factors. And just the regulations and rules on the ground about how and where those buildings are built. So we plan using a number of tools. We often say that the tools that are given to us as planners are granted through the Municipal Government Act, and that tells us what are the different things that we can and can't regulate. So we've got our toolbox. With our toolbox, we like to craft first the official plan, which we think of as the blueprint for the community. This is the document that really has kind of those high level policies, the vision, the guiding principles for kind of the why behind what we're doing. And then the development regulations, which is part of your zoning and development bylaw, those are really the kind of nuts and bolts of things. That's the development rules on the ground. So that's your setbacks from the street, that's your lot coverage requirements. All of those different things are your actual regulations. And it's important to note that the development regulations have to agree with the official plan, the policies in the official plan, and the official plan has to agree with the tools that are in the toolbox from the Municipal Government Act. So one of the aspects of that is the the provincial government sets out statements of provincial interest, which are kind of topics that affect all islanders, and planning has to address those various topics. So oftentimes that's, things like housing and drinking water. We plan for a lot of reasons. Planning really dates back to kind of just post-industrial revolution, when we made some pretty bad decisions about where we placed our housing. We thought it would be great to put our housing right next to the factories where everyone's working. Well, it's not exactly great for human health to be next to, points of pollution emission and things like that. So we started to kind of introduce planning over time that helps us to kind of separate incompatible land uses and really think more about creating cities and, urban environments as well as rural environments that meet the needs of all people and the needs of the environment around us as well. So we have to factor those things in and we have to work together. So, some of the key reasons why we plan is to support our community's character, culture, and identity. We also plan to enable different forms and densities of housing, so deciding what kinds of housing should go where. We also plan to prepare for change, so that can be environmental change, things like climate change. It can also be change like economic change. We've seen some pretty significant changes in the last few years, having gone through a global pandemic. And we can also prepare for change from a demographic perspective. So, in some cases, some communities have a rapidly aging population, and we need to plan for that. Other communities have younger populations, and we're going to get into this a little bit as well. But it's important for us to kind of think about what are the future needs of the community moving forward. Another reason is to create vibrant streets and commercial areas and try to, make rules that create places where people want to spend time and where they want to go. We also plan to set aside lands for economic development. So that can be for uses like commercial uses, but it can also be for different industrial uses. It can be for natural resource uses, for agriculture, for all kinds of different reasons. But it's important for us to think through those lands and kind of how those lands could be used in the future. It's also really, really important. One of the key things that I always talk about with planning is that it's really crucial that we use our infrastructure efficiently. So, our public infrastructure is our greatest investment that we all own, and we make this investment collectively as a community. And it's best for all of us if we're making efficient use of that infrastructure, and really trying to be smart about the ways in which we extend infrastructure, or the way we, perhaps kind of tie that to things like housing density and increase density in areas where there's infrastructure to support that density. We also plan, like I mentioned, to separate incompatible land uses. So, there are sometimes uses that don't go hand in hand, and that shouldn't be next to each other for a variety of different reasons. And so planning really helps us to make sure that there's a place for everything, but that those places are well thought out and that they have a good, strong, defensible rationale behind them. We also plan to promote land use compatibility. There are some land uses that make a lot of sense to be co-located together, things like commercial areas and residential areas. Oftentimes we see mixed use areas where we're kind of encouraging that compatibility of different land uses to create more vibrant communities. This also includes things like parks and open space, recreation facilities, things like that. So, kind of when we come down to it, I talked a little bit earlier about the Municipal Government Act and the tools in the toolbox. So, those tools give us things that we can regulate with planning. So, that's things like lot standards, building placement, building size, the uses permitted on the land, signage, location of services, things like street accesses, parking requirements, and the list goes on. So those are the things that we can regulate. Things that we can't regulate, which sometimes people think that we can and we can't. So we like to lay it out there at the beginning that we can't regulate people. So we do not regulate kind of who can own land where and who can't. We don't regulate anything like that. We don't regulate the land ownership. So we can't say this person can own this land or this person can't own this land. We have nothing to do with land ownership. We also, surprisingly for a lot of folks, can't regulate taxation. So oftentimes, especially when there's zoning changes in a community, people think, oh, if my zoning has changed, does that mean my taxation rate changes? But the way that taxation works is based off of the way that your property is currently being used. So if it's residential, you're taxed at a residential rate. If it's commercial, then you're taxed at a commercial rate. If you have a home-based business, they will calculate a commercial taxation rate based on the square footage of your commercial, and you'll get two rates of taxation on your property. The other thing we can't regulate is provincially owned roads and highways. So we don't really have much that we can do or say there. We do talk to the province, various departments of the province, whenever we do land use planning projects. But when it comes to things like potholes and things like that, there's not much that we can do through this project for that. So, as I mentioned before, planning is a collaboration. It is meant to be, I always say our plans should be co-designed by everyone. So, it should be town council, residents, businesses, town staff, different community organizations. You have a planning committee, and they, see a lot of different, get kind of a more hands-on look at planning in the community, and they're a great resource for projects like this. It's also great to talk to our neighbors, the other municipalities that we share our borders with, and to talk to them as well. And then we always talk to the province as part of these projects, as I mentioned, because at the end of the day, plans get sent to the province for review and approval. So, a little bit about the context that we're working in. I'm sure you've seen Cornwall has been growing quite significantly. So you're one of the fastest growing municipalities in Atlantic Canada, and I would not be surprised if you were actually, in terms of the percent change, one of the fastest growing in Canada. So the regional population change on the left shows by percentage from 1996 to 2021, and we have three different lines here on the graphs. So the darkest blue represents Cornwall. We have the lighter blue, which represents Queens County, and then we have the green line, which represents PEI. So you can see that Cornwall has really taken quite a steep rise in comparison to the average in Queens County and the province more broadly. On the right, you see a graph that looks at three different growth scenarios: a low growth scenario, a medium growth scenario, and a high growth scenario. And these are the types of things we look at when we're looking into the future at how many people are we planning for? So, what kinds of housing types do we need to enable, and how many housing units might we need? So again, you're seeing a continued trajectory of growth, but not quite as steep as what you've seen before. We know that 2011 to 2021, there was a very significant rise in immigration. The PEI did a lot of really trying to kind of bring newcomers to PEI and bringing in skilled labor and all kinds of different folks from all over. And we know that federally, the taps have been turned down quite a bit when it comes to immigration numbers. So we don't expect that continuous high rise, but we do expect there to still continuously be a rise in population in Cornwall. So this next one, it's a little bit crazy to look at. We're going to put these slides up online so folks can kind of take a look at them in their own time. But this one talks a little bit about age. And I think some people are really quite shocked to find out. So on the left is an age graph. Again, the darkest blue being Cornwall, the lightest blue being Queens County, and the green being PEI. And if you take a look at those lower age brackets, Cornwall is outpacing the average in Queens and in PEI quite significantly in the younger age categories, which means that Cornwall is actually quite young. The average age in Cornwall in the last census was 38 years old, which is significant. So you have a lot of kind of families in Cornwall, and it's becoming even more and more of a destination, a location where people want to move to raise a family. We are excitedly in a census year right now, so we are going to, throughout this project, be able to compare the most recent census data that everyone hopefully filled out their census. So we will, once that data comes through, we'll be able to kind of look at, okay, what has the change been like from 2021 to 2026? So it's always exciting when we get to look at new, fresh data when we're in the middle of one of these. But at the moment, the population in Cornwall, where 2021 was 60, just over 6,500, and the largest age cohort in the community was 20 to 24 years old, which again, very young population. From an economic standpoint, so on the left is income. Again, same, all the graphs, same thing. So the darker blue is Cornwall, lighter blue is Queens, and the green is PEI. So one of the things to note on the left is that Cornwall actually has kind of a higher than average um, before tax household income. So on average, compared to the rest of PEI, Cornwall is a bit more affluent than other communities. We also see on the right-hand side the sectors of employment here. So the highest sectors of employment in the community at the moment are things like public administration, healthcare and social assistance, professional, scientific, and technical services. There's also a higher than average amount of retail trade, which I think was surprising to some folks at the last meeting, because they feel that Cornwall doesn't have a ton of retail. But per capita in comparison, these are kind of the leading sectors of employment at present. Housing, this one is very interesting as well. So household size, on the left-hand side, we see the graph that represents household size in the community in 2021. And what you're seeing here, which is quite interesting to me, and I think the colors in the legend are actually incorrect on the left. So you just kind of have to take everything up a notch. That 37.6% of the households are one person households. 16.3% are two person, 15.5, three person, 7.2 are four-person households, and about 23% are five plus. So it's quite interesting to me that you're seeing that Cornwall actually has a fairly high amount of one and two-person households. This is fairly common now across North America, is we're seeing more and more one and two-person households than we've ever seen before, which is has a real interesting impact on the kinds of housing that we need, as well as the number of units that we need, because we have less people living in the same number of units as we had before, which means that we require additional units, even if we don't have a population growth. So it's a really interesting situation that we're in. And on the right, you can see the breakdown of dwelling types in Cornwall. So at the bottom there, again, there's a mistake in the colors here. So that bottom one represents the single dwellings, which is 61%. Then you've got 7.8% of the housing is apartments, 10.8% is semis and duplexes. Row houses are 14.2%, and Cornwall has about 6% mobile and other forms of housing as well. So an interesting mix there, but quite a small amount of apartment units at the moment. Which, when we think about the needs of one and two person households, is something to consider. when we think about the types of housing that we might need into the future. So, in terms of the project timeline, kicked things off just within the last couple of months, and we've been running the engagement, started last week. So, we are running that until the end of the month. And this is really the phase where we want to hear, what do people love about living in Cornwall? What are the challenges of living here? What are people's visions for the future? What have been their experiences of growth? You've gone through this phase recently of real change. So we want to know, are there any good lessons to be learned from that experience and things that we want to maybe do a little differently moving forward or consider more as we move into the future? So we're going to take what we learned from this phase of engagement and we will compile a what we heard report so that we can reflect back to folks what we've been hearing. Then we'll develop a policy direction report and we'll be working with council and staff to determine where we want to go with this plan based off of what we heard in the earlier round of engagement. And we'll be developing that draft plan. We'll then take that draft out to the public in winter this coming year. And what's really important to note with draft plans is that they are a capital D draft. They are absolutely not meant to be set in stone. They are meant to be kind of, this is our first attempt at this based off of everything we've learned. Did we get it right? Are there things we didn't consider that we need to consider? And then we kind of tweak things after that based off of what we hear again from the public during the draft plan engagement. And then we move things through the final plan and adoption phase, which will take place around this time next year. So with the initial phase of engagement, we have a number of opportunities to engage. So we've got this online public meeting here tonight. We had a public meeting last week. We also did community pop-ups. So we were hanging out in front of the Independent on Tuesday last week and just meeting people and talking to them and, hoping to get some people engaged in the project who might not necessarily otherwise partake in a process like this. We also did a pop-up outside of the Village Green on Wednesday night last week and caught some folks who were going to the run club. It happened to be Global Running Day, so there were lots of folks at the run on Wednesday, but folks who came to the food truck as well and just stopped in to have a bit of a chat with us. And then we went to the seniors lunch on Thursday, and that was an excellent opportunity to talk to lots of folks because there was 84 people at that seniors lunch, which I have to say was quite impressive to our team to see the kind of programming that the town offers, and how well it's the uptake is on those things. So in addition to those kind of in-person and this meeting, we also have a couple of online options for folks to share feedback. We have an online public survey that's open until June 28th, as well as an online map activity. And if you've been on our website, you may have seen the online map activity. It's been great. We've gotten so much feedback on it already, which is awesome. I think there's well over 40, almost 50, I think, comments on the map already. And it's great because you can see what other people had to say as well. So you can leave comments, but you can also kind of go around the map and see what other people had to say. And you can say whether or not you agree with what they said. You can also disagree with what they said. So it's a really great tool for learning a little bit more about specific areas of the town. So those are the opportunities to engage in this initial phase. I did kind of craft some questions that are just kind of more kind of philosophical, some of them, for thinking about, just things to reflect on as we have our discussion once we finish the recording. So just a few questions to consider. So one of those is reflecting on the growth of the last 5 to 10 years. Can you think of lessons learned that should be considered when we're planning for the next 5 to 10? Also thinking about, what do you want Cornwall to be in the next 10 to 15 years? Are there things you want to see more of? Are there things you want to see less of? Are there any particular housing types or certain housing for certain demographics that you feel are missing from the housing spectrum in Cornwall? What other priorities might you have for the plan review? So we're looking at things like transportation, recreation, public space, economic development. We also want to know what kind of development do you want to see enabled or maybe incentivized in the town moving forward. So that is the end of my spiel. Thank you for listening. We will turn off the recording now and we can have some discussion.